All right, and we're back.
Let's go.
Welcome, welcome. Awesome,
All right.
cool. Yeah. So
So,
what should we get into this week, Ted?
well, some things I'm working on right now that I would love to work through is along the same lines of what we both do, which is essentially outsourcing labor and leveraging other labor markets.
Hmm.
But what I'm specifically wanting to do is bringing in new processes that are for our own business, but outside of what we deliver. So we deliver all sorts of digital services for clients, websites, graphic design, video editing.
Hmm.
We'll build backend systems, et cetera. But I need to build systems for my own company that I wouldn't normally fulfill for my clients, but
Hmm.
I'm basically treating my own company like it would be a client of ours. Of all right, I need to build a
Hmm.
outbound lead generation system. I need to make the SOPs and train
Hmm.
employees same way as if I came into a company and they needed those same things.
Hmm.
I would I would do that for them. So I'm kind of
Hmm.
going through some of the things that I need and figuring out how to essentially create those systems and implement them. Except I'm just doing it within my own company instead of what I would normally do, which is implement it in somebody else's company. Um, and I'm curious to hear how you go about this. But my thought process, which I don't think is anything out of the ordinary, is you go through the entire process yourself. You track every single step of the process, get it down to a science for yourself, and then you bring somebody else in, whether you create the SOP with them or you create it first and then go
Hmm.
through the training process with them. Uh, but bottom line is you have to do it first. There's no
Yes,
hire to
100%.
solve, at least in earlier stages in business. It's solve and then hire and train. So you have to be
Yeah.
the one that's doing it um, first.
Yeah.
Have you found that same concept to be true, or are you able to hire to solve these issues a lot of times, or it's you have to do it first, or at least get enough of an understanding to even know who to hire?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's from my experience, that's one of the main things that's been wrong with startups and companies that I've seen or been involved with that weren't performing well, is they were trying to do exactly what you said not to do. So it was like the founders looking to solve their growth problem by having other people come in and solve their growth problem. And ultimately, growth, your sales process, your distribution strategies, if you don't own that as a founder, you're the one who has the highest incentives to get that solved and to find a way to get to market. And so if you're not owning that, you're really doing a disservice. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who get lucky and are in the right space and do that, but I've only seen failures when it comes to companies where the founder or the leadership isn't owning that strategy. And so for me, I would say you need to be the one leading the experimentation. You need to understand how you get clients and you need to be in the weeds of building that out because that's ultimately the number one constraint to every business is growth. I mean, it's we provide a lot of engineering support and finding good engineering talent is really hard, but what holds them back from building their product further is whether they can actually figure out that growth equation. So that's really the hardest part of any business, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think I definitely see how valuable having like the strong CEO and then strong COO, like in your case, yourself and Patrick, where somebody can kind of be more focused on the outwards and someone's more focused on the inwards, where it's,
Hmm.
there's growth, lead gen, sales, like branding, promotion, everything that's moving forward on the outside. And then there's also obviously fulfillment and actually providing the service is so valuable. And so as a solo founder, I'm currently in the process of getting my fulfillment completely hands off from me And so for me, not having someone else that can focus on it from a founder level, it's really about like the two people I have in place right now. I think I've hired very well, and now I need to just one get them in a position where they're capable of doing it, but two is just like actually letting go, which is
Yeah.
such a hard concept, especially for a founder, where it's like there is some risk involved in taking a step back. But um, I spoke with a very successful internet marketer, Tanner Chittister. I'm not sure if you know of him, but he has uh, multiple multi-million dollar revenue companies. And we had dinner, and he said the most important thing for any business is to put somebody in place and then get out of their way. He says the problem is the founder is typically in the way of team members that are trying to get the job done. And so I think a key thing is like you obviously need to hire well, you need to train well, you need to have your systems in place. You do need to be on the forefront with the ideation, implementation, testing, exploration, but you need to know when to take a step back and let your team run. And that's really the difference in being able to scale or not. I think obviously sales, lead gen, growth is probably the last thing you ever want to outsource as a founder. Like you want to be on the forefront of that for as long as possible. But everything up until that point, you need to take a step back. You're going to make mistakes, but you're going to learn from it. And often you're your hardest critic. So you'll be like, oh, this email is not perfect or whatever. Most people don't even see it. And if they do see it, they don't care. And if the company's able to grow, make more money, they're naturally going to be able to fulfill better. So I've been trying to take my hands off a lot of things, and it generally works out for the better.
Yeah, I think having a good understanding of where your strengths lie too, and where your blind spots as a founder might be. I mean, you really need to, you need to know technically, are you the one who's going to be able to solve complex technical problems, or do you need to bring in a team member who can lead that? Are you going to be the one leading the growth? These are all questions I think founders need to figure out. I mean, often, besides figuring out the sales equation, the delegating, that's something I think then you've got some traction. So you've got something that's working. And so most people don't get to that stage. They need to figure out the actual distribution first before they worry about delegating. And then once you've proven that distribution strategy, you should continue to stay involved in it. But then also, I personally see a lot of founders from my end who are struggling with their tech vision and who are struggling to figure out how to build an app or how to manage their backend, or they've been working with an agency and the code base is a mess and they don't know what to do moving forward. And it's so much different, if you're young, I would highly recommend you continue to build your technical capabilities, because when you see a founder who doesn't know anything about their back end and is completely handing it off to third parties all the time, they're just handicapping themselves. And these are just skills that you can learn. Even if you learn them slow, just keep learning them, because pretty soon you'll have an understanding about, okay, where does Webflow fit into the equation? Where does WordPress fit into the equation? Where does a custom website fit into the equation? What's a front end? What's a back end? How can I tell that my engineer is doing a good job? How can I actually read and understand the code base, how it's pushed to production, how we maintain it, how we secure it? Our careers are long and we're in the early days still. So, for us, learning is so important. And for people, around our age and younger, learning is always the best investment. So I think continuing to invest in your knowledge about growth. Every day I'm studying our growth. Every day I'm studying our tech. And it's a long runway. So I know it's a marathon. I mean, I think David Sachs said this about Elon, because David worked with him at PayPal, and he was saying it's been so crazy to watch Elon because he just keeps learning and now he's become this like master Jedi of startups because he was coding at Zip2 and then PayPal and X.com when they merged, and
then chief engineer at
yeah,
SpaceX.
exactly. So I mean, some people hate on Elon saying, "Oh, he doesn't actually know how to code or he doesn't know how this works," but pretty sure the guy understands how things work. I mean, he's obviously got other talented people he works with, but he's getting into the weeds, and I think getting
Yeah.
into the weeds is really important.
Yeah, I think the key there is you need to know enough to find who the people are that know more than you. Because if you don't know
Mhm.
anything, you might find someone that sounds like they know what they're talking about, but you don't have the capabilities to check that. So obviously
Mhm.
you need to find people that are smarter than you, but if you're not smart enough to even recognize those people, and then you're trying to hire people to solve your problems, that's a good way to just drain your account. So that's one part of it. Number two, which is like the Elon being chief engineer at SpaceX, is that he said he didn't want to be chief engineer. He just couldn't find an engineer that was better than him. And now every
Mhm.
engineer in the world, um, debatably, wants to go work for
Mhm.
him at SpaceX. So I don't think he has a problem finding people that are smarter. But
Yeah.
either you're not going to be able to find someone for a certain period of time, or you're going to lose that key person at some point down the line. And if
Mhm.
you aren't able to step in and handle that key position, then everything could crumble. So you kind of act as either the leader or the backup to that person in case anything happens. Because if you're completely dependent on one person and you have no understanding,
Yeah.
then you have an incredibly fragile system.
Mhm.
Um, and so you really have to be a jack of all trades, so to speak,
Yeah.
or else you're just at incredible risk.
Yeah. And I think whatever your business is, you should be the one who's, if you're the founder, then whatever your niche is, you should really have a passion for that niche to where you're the one exploring it all the time. Whether you're an SEO agency, a digital agency, a development shop, an app, a social platform, whatever you might be, you should always be leading the charge on, okay, let's say you're a social app. You should know how all the top social apps went to market. What was their strategy? Okay, so it looks like they all got markets in universities where they could build a small community and get really a viral user base that then spread to other universities. Seems like a pretty good strategy. Okay, what else did they do? Probably, some social media, certain features that they had that unlocked their usability. But I see a lot of people who don't study the basics of whatever space they're in. And now we live in a time when the internet has everything that you want to search for. So you can go out there and you can search and you can see, how did Twitter start? How did Facebook start? How do most agencies, build their business? You can go study 50 agency websites and see what they're doing. And so, there's a lot of good stuff you can do. I'm
Yeah.
always studying websites. It's incredible how many great websites there are and people's pitches, how they communicate their value differently, the different design standards you see in different websites. Yeah.
Mhm. One thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the social networks there, I feel like you need to do either one of two things if you're trying to come out with a successful company. The first, which is the most guarantee, most likely to work, is uh, copying everything that has been proven to work already and then just doing slightly better or something slightly
Yes.
different. Not a massive change or not something massively different, but just slightly different. Maybe you're focusing on a certain niche. Maybe you just add one
Yes.
additional key feature, whatever it might be. The flip side of that is doing something just about 100% different. If you are
Yeah.
going a different route, it needs to be a completely different. It needs to be revolutionary.
Yeah.
And this might be the case for search with like these large language models. We might not be searching on Google ever again in the future because ChatGPT and all these other large language models completely flipped the entire industry. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. Then they're going to incorporate voice, and you're just going to be talking to your devices, searching things, and maybe even Neuralink is plugging it directly into your brain. But if you tried to take a search engine and make it kind of different, like half different, that would never work. If you made a search engine and then focused on a certain niche, or you did something slightly different, that could work. Or 100% different could work, but right in the middle basically never works. So it's interesting to see how people, they don't understand the value of copying, essentially. I think it was a Picasso quote. It was like, good artists create, great artists steal, or something along those lines. And it's totally true. And you see it with the most successful companies. Twitter comes out with paid verification. Meta does it 1 month later. Snapchat comes out with stories, and Instagram comes out with stories a month later. So you see it time and time again. And those are the most successful companies, and that's why they're successful.
It reminds me of our guy Mark Lohr. I mean, he built diapers.com, and I want to say
Jet.com.
Jet.com, exactly. Sold one to Amazon, one to Walmart, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a few hundred million on each deal, something like that.
Yeah, and I think he's current CEO of Walmart Online still, or was.
Yeah, I think he transitioned. Last I saw, he transitioned away from that to work on building like a future city.
I did kind of hear
about what he does. But anyways, his whole thing that reminded me of him is you should just find something in the world that works really well, that you can do better, and go do it better. And that works for so many businesses, and it's such a great strategy. I would also, it's also cool to see unique ideas as well. So there's different flavors of building companies. There's, heavy research companies where people have their PhDs and they're doing highly technical stuff. There's really unique applications of things where you're kind of testing a solution to a problem and you don't really know if there's a market. I mean, look at how Twitch started out with Justin TV. The guy's just walking around, filming himself, hanging out, and they're just working so hard to figure out. They had this feeling that streaming was going to be a thing, and they were just exploring the solution space. That's a very different business and a startup, so to say. And I think it's a cool thing. I would never want to do that personally for my first venture because it's very risky. It's much less risky to do something proven and do it well than to do something that's completely an exploration exercise like that. And, I view myself as probably trying more ideas like that later on in my career when I have more experience, more assets, more skill set, that I can just look at problems and try to find the right solution for those problems. But I think doing that early in your startup career is something I'm really glad I didn't do, actually. Of course, if I would have done it and done it well, it's a different story. So it's good that people take those bets. But yeah, it was one of my reflections.
Yeah. Well, and another thing is you're going to learn and grow so much throughout different businesses that you can start with something that is more guaranteed or more money up front, less risk, something you can learn in. And then either that business can eventually turn into something completely different, or you can end up making a successful exit or even failing at that, and then taking what you learned in that process and moving it towards something else. And so I think one thing about us a long time ago, and I think most people fall into this as well, we didn't fully go into this, but we're always thinking like, all right, what's the next Amazon? Or what's the next, like it's always this massive thing. And even
you have to build the next Google.
Exactly. And even Bezos having, like, he did want to build Amazon. He had the understanding and the vision to say, I cannot build Amazon the everything store and the cloud services
Exactly.
like business, but I can make an online bookstore. So even the
Exactly.
people that are same with Facebook, I think Zuck probably didn't have quite the same long-term vision, but started with just a Harvard social media. And so even these, like you're talking about with Twitch, it all starts from something small. So if you want to have that grand idea, just start with something small and then reiterate and
Yeah, they
and
all like
adjust.
find a beachfront first to like enter the market, you know? Or like I think Peter Thiel talks about it as like different pools of competition. And so you kind of start out in the small pool and you just like master that. You do that well, and then you know, jump into the next league and the next league.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think really, really practically, one of the best things that I would recommend is just try to do something that's a real business where you actually can make a deal, make money, provide value. Don't get so caught up on ideas that are more about this is this incredible solution. We have this great problem we're going to solve. I mean, that's good, but then it better be a really good solution. And people should
Yeah.
then be willing to pay for it. I mean,
Well,
Patrick and I had so many ideas early on about, you know, ways for companies to survey and, you know, just different experiences we had. But at the end of the day, to build some of those business models that were great ideas, so to say, it's going to be a long slog of trying to find a market for a solution that wasn't really needed. And I think that's a huge problem many people have. Or I think also people jump into the biggest bandwagon but don't find a way to differentiate. And so, you know, I feel like we've had a few big bandwagons for smaller entrepreneurs. I don't know if you would, if there's any others you would add to this, but drop shipping felt like it was like the thing for like teenagers to get into. Um,
definitely.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah, and the thing with a lot of those are a lot of people make money at the very start because
hmm
it's so phenomenal, and then it starts getting saturated, and then the people that end up making money are the ones that, in the drop shipping case, it's the people that ended up selling drop shipping store like done for you drop shipping for other
yeah,
people. The other
yeah,
people, they like the end client, maybe they made a little bit of money. Some people did, some people got scammed, some people failed, some people succeeded. But everyone that was selling these done for you stores or selling courses on it, on how to do it, it's kind of
yeah.
like
The suppliers of the gold
did
rush.
the
Yeah,
exactly the people selling
yeah,
the shovels. Levi Strauss made out. Now they were just selling jeans to this gold miner. So
mhm.
if you're one of the first people, or if you're lucky or insanely talented, then those can work. But generally, it's the safer bet, and often can be the most successful, is those people that are providing services to that. So uh,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a great point. And usually in the cases of that is, if everyone knows about it, you're already too late,
Yeah.
for sure. So if everyone knows about it, you still like that industry, find a way to be like an ulterior company, but
Yeah.
not
That's
wanting
why,
to.
I mean, right now, I think there's so many people who want to build with GPT, for instance. And I want to help people build with GPT. Some of those applications probably aren't going to be the right formula, but there's also going to be a lot of really cool stuff people are building. So we're doing a big push now on making sure that we have the best engineers who are skilled in using the GPT API as well as backend development in order to build good systems that can do chat systems, that can do translation systems, that can do content production systems, all the things that the Chat GPT API can do. I mean, it's going to be some really cool applications. When you think about if Chat GPT could just be in a voice interface, it's already great. I mean, it's so fun how good it is, especially for coding. And I think this will become it. It already is becoming an overhyped. I mean, anything that gets hyped gets a little overhyped, but it does feel like this is a true paradigm shift, so to say, in computing and tech. I mean,
Mhm.
all the true signals I follow, all the really smart people I follow, the Paul G's of the world, David Sachs, all of the people that I respect in the tech space really get the feeling that this is like microprocessors, that this is really just going to shake things up. And so that part of it is super fun. Um, and I think those applications are what people fall in love with, but sometimes the value is just in the core tooling as well.
Mhm. Yeah. My thought on, because I want to get into leveraging AI as much as possible, because, which I
Mhm.
think everyone should, because I think it's the
Yes.
only real business moving forward. The only industry moving forward is going to be
Yeah.
leveraging AI. Doesn't matter if you're in
Mhm.
construction, plumbing, software development, property
Mhm.
management, every single industry is now going to still be their unique industry, but is going to be based upon your ability to leverage this
Yeah.
new technology. And I would love to just start doing that now, but
Mhm.
my thought is twofold. One, it kind of goes back to, all right, do you want to jump into something that's like, um, it's not maybe as practical of like, this is what I can do today. It's more of
Mhm.
like a larger dream, or do you want to do something that like, you know, is working today that you can just slightly iterate on? So
That's
something a
the
little bit more
thing.
proven.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
the second part is, I don't think a lot of these technologies are there yet. They could
Yeah.
be there in 1 month or 1 year, and they're coming very, very soon. But if I can create systems, a team, customer base, understanding all around these legacy systems in certain industries, and then constantly be thinking of, all right, how can I uh, create videos through AI? How can I do voice
Yeah.
cloning? How can we create e-commerce sites through AI? That the technology isn't quite there to sell those services right now. GPT is probably the most usable like AI software I've seen, where you can actually integrate chat into your website or app, whatever it might be. But even GPT is still not quite where it needs to be highly successful for integrating. So
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
it's what can you do to be ready for the exact moment when it's like, okay, now we don't need to film video anymore. Now we don't need to write scripts. If you're writing scripts with ChatGPT, they're still not that good. They're still not better than a
Yeah.
human in a lot of ways, but it will be very
Yeah.
soon. So how do you prepare for that moment instead of focusing on, oh, well, it's going to be, let's try to do it now. No, what can you do now? So when that moment comes, you already have a team, you already have a system, you already have a client base, and you can move forward on it. So that's what I'm really focusing on right now is getting ready for that moment while still building a business, while still making money today.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, focusing on the things that are actually working now is so important. I mean, there's amazing technology out there today. You're in San Diego, I'm in Stockholm. We're able to film this in real time and record a podcast together. I mean, all the technology that goes into that is insane. It's just people get excited about what isn't here yet. There's so many good problems today that you can solve, and you can have an incredibly successful business for solving those problems. And so I think falling in love with what's actually the king of the market today and getting good at that is often a better investment than trying to get so good at what you hope will become the leader of the market. At the same time, learning and investing in growth, you know, you have to make bets a little bit. And you and I have been big on AI for a long time, and Chat GPT only lights a fire under me to learn more. And so for me, I'm thinking about my positioning on where I want to sit in that spectrum of users with AI. And I studied machine learning at the University of Washington, and actually what I came away with was I don't want to be someone who's tuning the models. That's not what I love. But I think somewhere in between understanding the models, overtraining, undertraining, the data sets, what goes into them, and the application is where I want to sit. Some other people will probably sit more on wanting to sit with the models all day. Some people don't even want to see the models. They want to focus on the business applications, using them to scale customer service, using them to scale content creation, whatever it might be. Um, so it's a lot of self-awareness, I guess, and figuring out where you fit in. But dude, I'm excited about this space. I'm super excited. I was super excited back in 2016 when convolutional neural networks started working with uh, processors in order to do the computer vision stuff that was so revolutionary, where we could really do facial recognition well, where we could count inventories really well. All of that really kicked off, but I always felt like it was such a hurdle to have a solution. Now with chat, I'm using it every day in my coding to speed up my coding. It that alongside with Google is kind of like my pair programmer together with me working. And also with content creation, just it's not going to create the perfect blog or the perfect tweet, but it helps improve the speed and also your enjoyment because you don't really hit roadblocks. You can make a massive guide on something highly technical, and it can help speed you up so much in producing that. Or any piece of content, it's really incredible at how fast and how good of a partner it is in creating content.
Mhm.
So I think that space is going to be interesting. I'm not sure how it's going to change search when there's all this AI powered content. One thing we are doing is we're heavily heavily editing it and combining it with human input. So it's a tool we use to create better and more content, but it's not pure chat GPT content, if that makes sense. And to me,
Mhm.
that's going to win in the medium term, but it's going to be interesting to see where search goes and where all of this content goes, because it's going to get into video. If we do enough of these, we can have an AI podcast that's generated from us. You can just take your voice and you pitched this idea to me, which I thought was great. Having your voice over different content, you don't actually have to say it. You can just have the AI of your voice over different content.
Mhm.
So many cool applications. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have no idea what the long term is, but like you were saying in the medium term, and this could be in the long term as well, it's obviously going to be very dependent on uh, these different softwares and these different companies, but the human's ability to work with them. Like let's say we're using AI to write video scripts,
Hmm.
like a movie, like a literal movie.
Hmm.
Well, you're still probably going to have a director that is shaping that art form because having
Exactly.
the uniqueness of like human creativity, I think will always be valuable, at least to humans. The computers might not care, but there's always going to be value in human created art in general. Human paintings that
Yeah.
are 100% human are still probably going to be the most valuable, or at least some of the most valuable moving forward. And let's say like blog writing. If you get ChatGPT to write a blog, if you have a human kind of work with ChatGPT, humans writing the prompt, maybe the human's doing a little bit of editing, maybe it's asking it to change the style a certain way. The collaboration is going to create something more valuable almost every single time. So it really comes down to the human's ability to use it. And we'll see what happens in the long run. Maybe there's no use for
Yeah.
humans in the computer's eyes long term, and they just start running society. But that's where the real value is the collaboration. And it goes straight back to what we were saying at the very start of you can't just hire to solve the problem. You can't just, okay, now I have ChatGPT. I don't need to ever write a blog again, or I don't ever
Yeah.
need
No.
to write code again.
No.
I don't, it's always, all right, how are you going to use it? How are you going to train it? What are the systems around? Like, are you going to get your team to use it in a certain way?
Yeah.
It's,
I
that's
mean, people, I
same
don't
concept.
think many people go deep enough on something. Like let's just talk about articles. Okay, like someone gets Chat GPT, okay, I can write an article. Okay, good. But have you checked that article to make sure it's hitting all the keywords that you want? Have you made sure the H1, H2s are correct in the way you want? Do you have enough images in that article? How's the speed of that article and the loading on your site? What about the metadata? What about the structured data of that article? Where are you distributing that article to get traffic? Do you have an RSS feed? Are you landing on all of these social media platforms as well? Do you have anchor links in your article? Do you have backlinks in your article? I mean, these things go so deep for everything. For every little thing, there's people who just have businesses on the back of blogs. There's people who just have businesses on the back of social. I mean, I'm not the best at social, better on web, but I really think just knowing where your domains are and where you're going to succeed, and you have to go deep too, because with Chat GPT, if you don't go deep, you're not going to be able to stand out. And it does require just skill and persistence to create better and better content too. So
Mhm.
the human's gonna be critical, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the sense of different niches or different cultures. Um,
Yeah.
I was listening to Sam Altman speak with Lex Friedman on the Lex Friedman podcast, and he was talking about how ChatGPT is going to need certain controls by the user in order to
Hmm.
just serve more people. Like the people at OpenAI, they don't understand the intricacies of most cultures in the world or certain
Hmm.
subgroups, whether that could
Yeah.
be like your local church or your sports team or like these all these small groups that need to
Hmm.
communicate in certain ways. Maybe they have
Hmm.
different slang. Maybe they have different inside jokes. Whatever. Like it goes down to as small as like a family. Whereas let's say you have your Google Home device where you're asking Google certain things, maybe your family speaks in a certain way. And eventually, I would assume that these softwares can learn themselves from a lot of ways, but whoever the head of the household is can say, hey, like, we want these kind of answers, or we want to speak in this type of way, whatever it is. And so every single home device is going to be treating that family differently than the other ones. So
Yeah.
and maybe in the future, we don't need human input for some of those things, but at least in the short and medium term, we 100% will need that. So it comes down to
Yeah.
like, who are those people that are changing these data sets and training these models? And
Mhm.
I was kind of thinking, as an example, in like the travel space. Let's say you're looking at Priceline and Expedia as an example. They need to be better at recommending a hotel, right?
Mhm.
And you could say a large part of their business is which one is going to be more successful is the one that can recommend the best hotel or the best flight or whatever it might be. So being able to have people in those companies changing those data sets, learning from their customers. Obviously, a lot of this done, and as of right now, is done um, automatically by tracking those things, what has the
Yeah.
highest click through rate, et cetera. But in the future, you could literally just say, put in a prompt on like, let's say Expedia, be like, hey, I want the like this budget, this, a hotel that is based around wellness that my son who has autism would be comfortable at, that my wife that likes this,
Yeah.
and these really intricate prompts that can get you just
Yeah.
one, just the best option. It just says this is the best for you.
Yeah.
And then they just click yes.
Yeah. It's going to be so important that companies like hotels get as much information about themselves out there as possible. Like you want a review from every user demographic out there, because what are these algos going to be training on? They're going to be training on the information you give them to feed them. So if you have user reviews saying like this was a great place for me and my wife to honeymoon, or this was a great place for us to spring break, those are different things. But if you target them to your different audiences, then those algorithms are going to then pick you up as the top place to go for X or Y or Z, whatever it might be. And I think there's going to be even more of a push to get that data out there. Um, I mean, it will be in a sense like, I mean, a lot of the winnings get concentrated at the top in all industries. So I think that's one thing people are worried about with chat as an alternative to search, is that what if you don't break into the recommendations, which many won't. I mean,
SEO is going to change forever with this.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
One thing I found interesting was his name was Iman, the founder of Stability AI. He was talking to Peter Diamandis, which if you haven't seen that, you definitely should. But there was this concern of people's data, like all of our data, and people are afraid that these companies are going to use our data, which I'm also afraid of, and I think we need to like have an understanding of the risks of that. But what I thought was funny, he goes, "Why do you think your data is valuable?" Because
mm,
there's so much data in the world, you don't want all of the data to train these different
yeah,
models. You want the right data, and obviously you need a lot. And I think the game used to be who has the most data. Now it's who has the right data and who's
yeah,
able to actually use that data in a valuable way. Where it's kind of to the point where if you're putting too much data into some of these models, there's a lot of shit in the world that is not going to benefit them. So it's funny to see like
mhm,
you need to filter out the things that aren't going to provide value, and you just need to make sure that you have the right
mhm,
information. Now, who says what is right? Who says what is true? Like obviously throughout like the
yeah,
pandemic, if you trusted certain scientists versus other ones, and you ask, what is the likelihood of contracting whatever, or what's the likelihood of
yeah,
this, then you would get a confident response from a computer or from a human saying this is correct. And then 2 years later, you find
yeah,
that's completely incorrect. So I think
mhm,
ChatGPT has done a relatively good job of objectivity as opposed to news networks. For example, if you listen to one news network, you get one bias, another one, you get another bias. We've clearly
yeah,
seen pretty strong bias in ChatGPT for certain topics, but I think overall it's been relatively objective, or at least showcases both arguments, even if it kind of leans on one a little bit harder. So I think like news is going to be completely changed, where it's like we all want an objective news network. Some bias is fun every once in a while. Like it's just kind of entertaining. If you lean one way or another, you believe something, you kind of just want to get reaffirmed. It's more of like entertaining. But if you actually want
mhm,
to understand a concept, why would you trust a human in a large corporation that has these biases and has incentives to spread a certain message versus a computer, which if you
yeah. They're
understand
just
it,
pawns. Exactly. Yeah.
and the AI can push a message too, but if you have access to that data set, if you have the ability to set certain limitations on there, then you could probably get a more objective approach.
Yeah. I think the legacy media is just it's too much following the rules and doing what makes sense to climb the ladder. And now with independent journalism, we just see way better results than the legacy media. I mean, I think it's a very positive movement. I'm curious, geopolitically, how do you feel about the level of stress and kind of political discourse around everything in the world today? And do you feel it's worse than it's been, better than it's been, or about the same as it's always been?
Um, I would say it's probably, I don't know if worse than it's ever been, and it depends on what you're looking at exactly. I do think social media just makes everything information spread more aggressively, ideologies.
Yeah,
It pits people against each other a little bit harder.
yeah,
It it removes the human element and the emotion from it, so you can go back and forth with someone really
yeah,
hardcore, and then you can hate them forever. Whereas maybe if you were in a smaller town where you were just arguing politics or whatever else with somebody in the bar,
Be a
afterwards
little more respectful.
you have to sit next to that person tomorrow. So like
Yeah,
either
yeah,
you're gonna get over it or you're just gonna forget it and you're gonna talk about something else. So I think that's a big issue. But I also think a lot of people have no clue what issues to actually address. I think most of what people are addressing doesn't matter at all by design.
yeah, yeah,
And there's
yeah,
larger things at play that everyone's
yeah,
arguing about all this surface level stuff um, when there's, and they're more fired up than ever, but they just fail to even
yeah.
understand the larger scale things. So we'll see. I definitely think technology uh, in the way things are moving with AI and military tech is extremely scary in terms of how government and world powers can utilize it.
Yeah.
I think, have you looked into this TikTok ban that is um, potentially going through Congress, this new bill?
Not the bill, but I've been following the debate a bit
Mhm.
on whether TikTok should be banned. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether TikTok should be banned or not, that's what I thought this debate was about as well. And I was kind of leaning on the side of, yeah, but I didn't really think about it too much. Do I want
Hmm.
Chinese interference? Are they collecting data? I think clearly. So that's something. I don't even think that's that big of a conversation. But then, and I haven't read the bill um, in depth, but as I gained a further understanding, the bill is not about banning TikTok. It's essentially the Patriot Act 2.0. It's, can the government penalize American citizens for using a VPN to get around app bans? Can you go to jail for using banned apps from other countries? In China, they can search your
Yes.
phone without a warrant,
Yes.
see if you're using a VPN on Facebook, and go to jail. America is trying to do that same thing. So they're hiding the, the they're behind, oh, we want to protect ourselves from Chinese apps, but we're going to do
Yeah.
so in a way that's very similar to how China cracks down on their own citizens. So we're becoming more
Yeah.
totalitarian under the guise of freedom, which is
Yeah.
completely, so that's the real conversation. And so now I'm fully against the bill from my understanding. I still want to do some
Um,
research. But that's kind of, that's
that's
very
crazy.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's one theory I have is that I think people always feel it's the worst it's ever been in a way because people are always feeling the stress in the now. But in reality, in human history, we've been through so much shit. And right now, life is pretty great despite a lot of the challenges going on in the world. And I think there's always been these political tensions, but we do have, some real issues. Um, I've been amazed at the rise of independent media, Joe Rogan especially, highlighting a lot of the things that go on behind closed doors of government organizations and decisions that are made. Because ultimately, it's people. And people, there's always been groups of people who have been bad actors and doing different strange power plays, whether it be, changing government regimes, propaganda, whatever it might be. And it reminded me of this quote that the cost of freedom is eternal diligence, something along those lines. And it's so interesting. And you also hear, another great quote is that the only way that it's essentially the only way that the world can move forward is by great men and women raising their voice against evil, and it's like it's so interesting to see that it does feel like there are many actors both in the US and in the world that it's like they're playing a different game. And I don't want to say that they're evil because I think people have different views, and I think a lot of people do think they're playing the right side of things. But it's amazing to me some of the issues that are no longer supported across the board. Like it's like freedom of speech and that core First Amendment, it feels like it's it's really gotten tested through COVID and all of this. It's as if governments got a little excited about their whole little system that they had going on.
Hmm.
And I mean, I was in Sweden the whole time, and it's been great here. And there's a lot of trust in the government here. It's a totally different animal, a much smaller system, much more efficient and well run for what it does and how it does it. Totally different thing than the US. But it's interesting to see. I can't believe that that's the type of bill they're trying to pass. But at the same time, if we look at history, history will show us there's always been people trying to pass things like that that allow
Hmm.
them to have more power, more influence, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that it's the best time to be a human in the history of our species, for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Clear, like we can get food delivered to our door within 20 minutes just by picking up a device and clicking something. So, starvation is pretty much is solved for almost all of the West, at least.
Mhm.
Slavery is solved for a large portion of the world. Like a lot of these issues, um, like disease,
Yeah,
all of
we're
this
moving
stuff.
forward. There's really hard battles all over
But
across a host of issues, but we're moving forward.
yeah,
That's for sure.
but
Yeah.
looking at the longer term, it does seem like there's some bigger issues long term at play. Like we've solved, and these are big issues, food insecurity, all this stuff. Those are the immediate issues. But I think long term of where is society heading, that I feel like is maybe more uncertain than ever
Yeah.
before in terms of are we
Yeah.
going to have a central bank digital currency where our spending is completely controlled? In the past, you couldn't spend money on illicit things, or you couldn't uh, do whatever it might be. Now, moving forward or down the line, if certain things get into place, if you, like in China, have a low social credit score, if you spend too much money on gasoline, now you can't buy gas. So then you can't travel to, let's say the hospital to visit your dying grandma because you
Yeah.
are over your carbon credit. You can't eat certain things because they're controlling the money of what they want you to eat. So like there's all these things that we've solved all these problems for the most part, but now that we can see tightening back on certain things and seeing a different form of, it's a little harsh to say slavery or like food control of food, but in a sense, I think there's going to be these controls that are put on a lot of people. I think the US needs to be the forefront of
Yeah. We
freedom,
can't
as
can't
we
let that
always.
fly. No way. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, but I think there's a big um, battle really moving forward on what happens.
I would feel so much more confident if the US would just be top in the world in like primary education. And like to me it's really like that simple. Like let's just like really try to solve that one. And if we have, I mean, we already have the best college education system, not for the price. And college is kind of questionable the way it's set up these days, anyways. But the primary education system, we should be striving to be the top in the world in the US. I mean, that one, I just don't know how that has never gotten attention really throughout our whole lives. It doesn't feel like anything significant has been done. And to me, that is super important to continuing to keep the innovation engine of the US going. I think also good immigration policies that bring in, top performing people from around the world to help innovate in the US. But we've got to help the American youth to be set up to succeed. That I think is like really the number one thing.
I agree. I don't see anything major happening there anytime soon. I think the most important thing for America, I mean, that would likely be the most important thing if it was realistic, if we could actually have an overhaul that people could agree on that was actually successful. But I think the thing that has kept America at the forefront of just about everything is the private sector. And the country was based on the premise of the government should do as little as it needs to do. Now, obviously, we're seeing some at least conversations about the exact opposite of the government getting into everyone's business. But I think the most important thing is just not kneecapping entrepreneurs, specifically small entrepreneurs, because I think capitalism can run rampant, and we can see, Amazon maybe having a little too much control or a lot too much control, Google, etc. I think we always need to be at least just enabling these smaller entrepreneurs, these innovators. Like, I mean, a great example is Elon Musk coming to the US and being able to build fantastic companies here. Um, we have obviously these a lot of these AI companies are coming up out of the United States, and so one, we need the government to not be able to suppress those people, and two, we need those people to continue challenging the status quo of large scale corporations. So we make sure that we don't get stuck in these monopolies that hinder innovation, that restrict freedom in any way for people if they get too powerful. So as long as government regulation doesn't kneecap small and medium-sized businesses, specifically innovators, I think we can continue being at
Yeah,
the
I'm with
forefront
that.
of everything. It
I'm
really takes
definitely
just a
with that.
small number of people. If we don't have everybody getting a great education, if we can just make sure that 1% or that 1% or that 1% can keep
Yeah,
moving forward, that I think is ultimately what is going to make or break the success of the United States moving forward.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
I'm definitely with that. I mean, the private industry is going to drive so much of just the innovation and the overall security. I think the education is really so needed, though, for the US to continue to grow into the role that I think everyone aspires for it to be in. And I think the lack of education will just continue to push it towards idiocracy, along with great private enterprise as well. But it's going to be sloppier. It's going to be more ridiculous political stuff. Um, so I just think the education is really the thing I would like to see changed. I mean, obviously, being spending so much time in Sweden over 5 years now, about somewhere around there, and doing a fair amount of traveling. There's no place like the U.S. for innovation, for people who are hungry, who are building, for the market that you have to enter. I think there's going to be some emerging places, India, Nigeria. There's some emerging places that are going to make a lot of noise, but the US will continue to lead in the high end, highly technical. I mean, if you look at like the chip market right now and what's going on, basically all the research that's done for high-end chip manufacturing is led by the US. You have some niche researchers and suppliers around the world for different parts of the supply chain. I believe the Netherlands does a specific type of magnifying glass that is used, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual R&D for the chips is done in the United States. And then at the end of the day, those are manufactured in Taiwan. And so, if we can maintain that R&D lead, to me that's also another, like, simple solutions are often the best, right? And like the thing that makes the most sense and is clear, usually, it's a good route to go. And if you always are having the best AI research in the world, you're probably in a safe spot for whatever happens with AI. Um, so I think that will continue to be important. Hopefully, we see more nuclear power and more power cost reduction throughout the world, more solar. I think we should be able to use tons of power, man. Like,
yeah.
you
Well,
know,
have you heard Chamath's idea of power will be free in the future? Energy will be free.
yeah, I hope it's not a constraint, so to say. I hope
Yeah.
it's like, near free. I mean, yeah,
We'll see. But I did want to touch on. I think the solution with education in the United States is going to be decentralization. I think anytime that something large gets centralized, then that centralized decision maker or power
yeah,
spread down to everywhere. You're gonna miss these like niche markets and these different, like these
Yeah.
cultural differences between states. That's the whole point of the
Yeah.
United States, is having the state powers. And I think
Yeah.
there's been a big limitation, and we've seen this debate a lot at school board meeting videos. A lot of states are putting bills into place to either keep the power of school boards and the centralization, or to give parents more of a say, et cetera. Is that we need to give, I do think, parents or individual school boards or just individual like mayors, local authorities, more ability to control their own education systems, as opposed to doing this top down idea where we're going to solve every state, every county, every city's education from these centralized decision making powers. I just don't see that as being possible at all. And if we decentralize, maybe some counties really mess up, but I think it's going to be more successful in the long term, especially in terms of the trades and some of these other valuable things that we're losing. Maybe farming for certain communities. Maybe it's in industrial plumbing for larger cities. Obviously, technology, AI, coding, all these more niche things, instead of just like this base level. All right, memorize when the French Revolution started. People can make decisions for themselves on, all right, is this base curriculum really valuable for our students or not? And they can move with much greater speed. And as we see technology improving, we're going to need to be improving our education system faster than ever before. And it doesn't seem like we've improved it in 40 years or 50 years at all. So
I would just love if, there's so much we don't know about this discussion. It's not like I've, written a dissertation on how we can improve this. It's just, this is the problem I would like more of the focus to be on, because then we're going to arrive at the right solution. I should have, Patrick or someone come on here sometime and we can talk about how Sweden does it, and just get an idea. It's a very different system. And I think another big part of the system here is, like, kids are never in danger in Sweden in the same way that they're stressed and in danger in the US, depending on their home environment. I mean, like, there are dangerous places in Sweden, but not by US standards. And then there's obviously many countries worse than the US, but I would love some more focus on that, man. Like, if we could see that, maybe DeSantis or someone could make a good push and do some of that. We'll see.
He's doing a lot with education now. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, cool. Well, I think
good sesh today.
It's about one here now. Yeah, just over an hour. But yeah, we'll have to do this again very soon. I'm glad we were able to talk about some different things, specifically some things that we're working on. And things that are more relevant to us exactly, and then always fun to touch on some geopolitics, and politics in general. So
yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers.
Cool.